What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Monday, June 27th, 2016, getting to the end of the month, coming up on that long 4th of July holiday. And we have got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. A quick little reminder that for our Wednesday show in hour number 3, Patrick Knowlton, witness to the Vince Foster case and subjected to a tremendous amount of harassment because of that, will be our on-air guest talking about what happened all the way back there. And before I get into the regular news here, I know we are not normally an entertainment website, but I did have to comment. I watched the season finale of Game of Thrones last night. It was very satisfying. There were so many accumulated sphincters that finally got their comeuppance, and so it was a very, very satisfying show on that regard. I'm sure you can catch the replay for it. I really do like that show, along with Elementary. I like that one as well. All right, on to the more serious news. As you know, the repercussions of Brexit are continuing, and more and more it's becoming obvious. There was, in fact, massive election fraud on the part of the Remain camp. It just didn't get enough to reverse what turned out to be an absolute landslide. And we're seeing these articles like over here in Kaahumanu.com about the lengths the elites went to defeat Brexit, including the use of taxpayer funds to sell a political agenda, which I don't know how the system works over in Great Britain, but that's sort of dirty pool here in the United States of America to use taxpayer money to push a political agenda. There are laws against that. Now, interestingly enough, there was a poll that was taken after the referendum, and that was, should we go forward with the Brexit? Now, the people who voted yes, saying the British government must respect the people's choice, because that's what democracy is all about, got 74.8%. And the people who said, no, the referendum isn't legally binding, the Parliament should keep us in the European Union, got only 25.2%. And this, I think, is a real measure of exactly how the actual voting for Brexit had gone. Remember, the Elections Commissioner admitted many of the ballot counting machines, when tested, were only registering Remain votes. If the ballot was marked Leave, it was not counted. So we have all these people who want to keep their little European Union, New World Order going, are trying to find some way they can do it. And there's a call for a new referendum. We have to have a new referendum. We're going to have referendum after referendum after referendum until we get the result that we want. And they're really getting on out there, because the call for the new referendum is already going to be tailored in a piece from the Times, no less. They're saying there should be a new referendum, but old people should not be allowed to vote. Because after all, they're old people, and they don't have to live with the consequences. Now, we know it was the older voters who voted to leave the European Union, because they're old enough to remember how good things were before the EU came along. The younger voters were easy to convince because they don't know any other life than being in the EU. So we even have this article over in Investment Watch blog. Young Remain voters are now openly advocating violence against old people to make them vote the way they're supposed to work. This is not democracy. This is absolute pure dictatorship. Now, Parliament took a good look at this petition. And it turns out this petition for a new referendum was actually set up before the Brexit vote, just to have ready to go in case the vote went against them. And already they've discovered it is fraudulent. A lot of the votes for the new referendum came from IP addresses outside Great Britain, which is not allowed. 39,000 signatures were registered from Vatican City, even though Vatican City has a permanent population of only 450. 23,000 votes claimed to be from North Korea. They want to cheat. They weren't able to cheat their way to enslaving Britain to the European Union, so they're going to cheat again. Now, members within the British government are telling David Cameron, don't delay, don't wait, forget October. Start the process to leave the European Union right now before the European Union can gin up some excuse why we have to stay. Now, Cameron has given himself 4 months. He's not actually leaving office until October, so he's got 4 months to pull something together, maybe a false flag attack, something that's going to give Parliament a reason to reject the referendum and still keep their jobs. By the way, quick little shout-out to our on-air affiliates rejoining our network. We're talking about the aftermath of the Brexit. We're talking about this fraudulent petition for a new referendum. They just want to have a new election and a new election and a new election until they get the results they want, which, by the way, if they're going to do that over there, then we ought to have re-elections in all these primary states where election fraud has been proven, all of which benefited Hillary Clinton. So you can't really have it both ways. Now, Parliament has already said, in fact, David Cameron has already said, no, we're not going to have a new referendum. They're going to take the fight to Parliament to ignore the will of the British people. That would probably, in my opinion, start riots in the streets of London. Now, Jeremy Corbyn, who was pushing for Remain, is in trouble. A lot of his members have stepped down as his ministers resign, and he's out there saying, I'm going to stay in, I'm going to stay in, I'm going to stay in. So there's going to be a dramatic shuffling of the British government. All right, we're going to go ahead and grab ourselves a phone call. Bob in Indiana. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, hello, Mike. I have a little question. When we go to war with Russia, because it looks that way, the Russians in this country who are legally here, are they going to be treated like I saw another group 75 years ago treated, and they took their houses and their gardens and put them in concentration camps? I would not like to have that happen.
No, I would not like to have that happen again either. But the good news is, with the Brexit happening, the United States anti-Russia agenda is stumbling badly, because Russia and Britain are already talking about opening up trade, peace through commerce, and this anti-Russia agenda required having a unified European Union that was going to do what Washington, D.C. told it to do. And Great Britain has basically said no to the EU, no to Washington, D.C., and at last count, 8 other member nations of the European Union are getting ready for referendums as well.
Well, the reason I ask is because I'm married to a blue-eyed, blonde Russian woman with a Ph.D. in agricultural science. She's the happiest, most trustworthy person I've ever known.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, the Russians I've met are all very wonderful people. I remember when I worked in Hollywood, there was this Russian actress. I'm not going to name her name because I don't want to get her in trouble. But she did a lot of movies, and she was just this sweetheart compared to a lot of other people I know in Hollywood.
Well, their government is kind of like our government, but the people are really good. I'll let you go, and thanks very much.
All right, well, thank you very much for the phone call, and I disagree with the idea that the Russian government is like our government. I'm sure that there's a deal of corruption inside Russia, but nowhere near the extent in Washington, D.C. Putin's trying to keep the corruption under reasonable control. Washington, D.C. has gone totally corrupt. Everybody in there is part of this scam to make themselves rich and powerful at the expense of everybody else. Now, getting on back to the European Union, there is a lot of celebration out there, and people are starting to say, you know, there were a lot of really dumb laws the EU commissioners were handing down that just never made any sense at all. Did you know the EU banned excessively curvy bananas and cucumbers. That was how the EU was micromanaging all of the European Union. Vacuum cleaners above a certain wattage were being banned. The EU declared that drinking water does not ease dehydration and banned bottled water companies from having any kind of labels saying that water was good to fight dehydration. I mean, that's how absurd they were getting. The EU banned diabetics from having driver's licenses. They had a law saying it's illegal to eat your pet horse. It's like the law of the hammer. You give a little boy a hammer, everything they encounter requires pounding. You give the EU unchallenged tyrannical authority to create laws, and they're going to create some pretty silly laws. The EU handed down guidelines as to what constituted a jam versus a preserve versus a conserve. The EU banned reusable olive oil bottles in restaurants. I mean, it was just petty, picky, nitpicky stuff. And the Europeans are just fed up with it. They really are. Now, what's really going on here is Obama and Merkel really thought that if they just shouted racist, racist, intolerant, intolerant, that people would shut up about the hordes of refugees and illegal immigrants pouring into our countries, and it wouldn't be a factor. But yes, it was a factor. Obama and Merkel just did what they wanted to do, and finally the British people did what they wanted to do. They said enough is enough is enough. Sweden's getting ready for a Swexit vote. We're running out of letters to make these contractions. Now, Merkel is already out there talking like De Führer, saying we have to prevent the departure of other countries in the U.S. We just have to. For their own good, we must invade. Sig Heil, Sig Heil. And apparently the plan is now to unveil a European superstate that will basically merge all of the remaining European Union member nations into a single nation totally controlled from Brussels. And apparently Brussels is planning on arm-twisting all these various governments into surrendering their sovereignty to the central ruler. And if it sounds like the evolution that the United States went through, from a confederation of separate states to today's tyrannical government, yeah, that's exactly what happened. They're just rushing it now because they've run out of time. And what we're hearing from Brussels is ein Volk, ein Welt, ein private central bank. One people, one world, one private central bank. And that's another reason the European Union is in trouble. It was built with a built-in self-destruct device called the European Central Bank, which has destroyed the economy of all the member nations, and they know that's what's going on. I'm expecting Greece to have their referendum literally any day. But that's going to be their solution. Simply declare a European superstate. You're all our bitches now, and you can't vote to leave anymore. And that's what Angela Merkel is putting out there. The instant they move to declare that superstate, you're going to see a rush for the exits. They're all going to be gone. Everybody's already afraid of the rise of Germany because of what happened during big mistake number 1 and big mistake number 2. Justified or not, people are looking at Germany as the harbinger of a new European dictatorship. And it doesn't help when Merkel is out there saying, we must stop members from leaving, even though it is in the charter, they're allowed to do so. Well, when we put that leave thing in the charter, we didn't think you were actually going to use it. I mean, come on, you know. What a swell thing the EU has been, if you're an EU commissioner here. All right, let's turn to politics right now. The Democratic Party platform is starting to shape up, and it's very ugly. For one thing, the Democratic Party platform is out there basically totally on Israel's side. As far as the Palestinians are concerned, they can drop dead. Bernie Sanders was unable to have any influence over the Democratic Party platform. And we'll be talking about that platform a little bit later in the show because it's covering a lot of areas. Now, the corporate media is beginning to strain at their leash over all these scandals that are going on. Over at CBS Face the Nation, they basically came on out and said this one email, work-related email, that Hillary Clinton failed to turn over proves she lied about using the private server for convenience. It proves she was evading Freedom of Information Act requests and oversight and accountability, and opens up the question, what other work-related emails have not been turned over? What work-related emails were deleted by Hillary Clinton, which, by the way, in and of itself is a felony under Title 18, to destroy government records without the proper procedure. And Hillary saying, do that is not the proper procedure. Now, the other day we were talking about this former United Nations General Assembly President, John Ash. And all of a sudden, he had this horrible accident where he was working out, and the barbell fell on his throat, crushing his larynx and killing him. Now, that's not very believable. In fact, it happens to be a storyline from an episode of Columbo. But it turns out John Ash was due in court today over his bribery charges. And it turns out his co-defendant is one Ng Lap Seng, who was involved in the Chinagate scandal back in 1996 and was in a position to drag Hillary Clinton into this whole corruption deal. And this is getting dangerously close to that question that I've been asking and will continue to ask. Was Hillary Clinton repeating the 1996 Chinagate scandal selling secrets to foreign governments in exchange for donations? And the only reason Congress was unable to prosecute any of these crimes is, oh, golly gee whiz, the White House email server had a problem and 1 million subpoenaed documents disappeared, and golly gee shucky, somebody had turned off the backup system just a week before. So John Ash goes on the Clinton dead bodies list. It's just way too convenient. Now, Donald Trump has come on out with a new attack against Hillary Clinton, the top 50 facts about Hillary Clinton from the Stakes of the Election address. It's a PDF. We've got a link to it, and you can look at it. And, of course, the corporate media is going to say, oh, this is all discredited. This is all, we told you it was discredited years ago, and you should believe us because we're the corporate media. No, we don't believe a thing you say. If the corporate media told me it was going to be a sunny day, I'd take an umbrella with me. Now, a couple of new scandals that have been added to the epic of Clinton's mess. One is the Uranium One deal, where the Russian Atomic Energy Agency Rosatom had taken over this Canadian company with uranium mining stakes stretching from Central Asia to the American West. And the deal made Rosatom one of the world's largest uranium producers. They're now basically controlling 25% of all uranium production on the planet. And at the time when this deal was put together, it required State Department permission, which was forthcoming. At exactly the same time, Russian money was pouring into the Clinton Foundation. Now, another scandal we've added to the epic of Clinton's mess. You know how we've been talking about all these fake gold bars that have been floating around? They were found in Germany. China got a bad batch of them back in 2009. China's mounted its own investigation, and they went from the serial numbers of these bars, and they went through the tracking that all gold bullion is tracked by an international agency, and discovered all of these phony bars were created by the Federal Reserve during the administration of William Jefferson Clinton. And they've been stored in Fort Knox. Now you know why they will not allow an audit or an assay of what's going on in there. And this was a topic we covered on that History Channel, America's Book of Secrets episode. And it turns out, yes, we were right. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, we're talking about all this gold that's gone missing. And we did cover this issue in America's Book of Secrets, The Gold Conspiracy. And now we're finding out, yeah, there's a lot of gold bullion bars out there carrying the hallmarks of the Federal Reserve and Fort Knox that are tungsten covered with a thin layer of gold. And the Chinese investigation, using the serial numbers and tracking records, says it all goes back to the Federal Reserve while Bill Clinton was President of the United States of America. Now, to be fair, it's not just Bill Clinton, because don't forget, when 9/11 happened, down in the basement vaults under the World Trade Towers, there was $300 billion in gold bars. Now, gold will not burn. It will melt, but you can pick it up and resmelt it. When they finally got down to the vaults, they were completely empty. So somebody's out there grabbing gold wherever they can here. Don't forget, the gold that was going to back Libya's gold dinar vanished after Gaddafi was killed. Now, as you know, today was the official launch of a book by Gary Byrne, who was a 33-year Secret Service officer, including the protective detail in the Clinton White House. And he has been writing out about all his experiences, saying the White House was a den of cocaine and mistresses. Apparently, when Bill Clinton would go out jogging, he'd see a cute girl, and he'd tell the Secret Service agents, get her name and phone number. Hillary's going to be gone this weekend. I got to have some company. Now, proving that we do live in a dictatorship and confirming what we got from that released Hillary email, that the corporate media is part of her campaign, Gary Byrne is now blacklisted from all broadcast networks. It was set up for all these interviews. They've all been canceled. I'm trying to reach him to see if I can get him on this show to get the word out there. But it is a reminder, the corporate media is not telling you what you need to know. The corporate media is telling you what they want you to believe. Hillary is wonderful. She's sweetness and light. She would never do anything wrong. I mean, let's be honest right now. Hillary Clinton could get up at the Democratic National Convention and set a kitten on fire, and the corporate media would say she's out there demonstrating the need for increased fire safety. Now, interestingly enough, the House Select Committee on Benghazi has been asking for President Barack Obama to come on over and answer some questions about what he knows about that 2012 attack on the consulate that left 4 people dead. The White House is refusing to participate and is out there saying that this is nothing but an attempt to make the White House look uncooperative. Yeah, the White House is being uncooperative. Now, over in Israel, as you know, they're really big on building walls. And for some reason, the liberals seem to think that Israel's walls are good and Donald Trump's walls are bad. But interestingly enough, the New York Times came out with an article saying that Israel's wall is nowhere near as effective as they like to think. Attackers could sneak through. It's porous, just like our southern border here. Now, up in Ukraine, NATO, as part of its let's annoy Putin until he does something we can use to start a war, has started a massive war games in Ukraine. And it's a large-scale military exercise. It's called Rapid Trident. And they're just running all over with their weapons, practicing to invade Russia, and I'm sure the Russians know that. Here in Hawaii, they're about to get underway with RIMPAC 2016, which starts on the 30th, and that will be quite impressive. They're actually going to have a live fire exercise against an obsolete ship. They're actually going to blow it up. Now, there's 2 good things about RIMPAC. First of all, when they're here, the Navy puts on a tremendous fireworks show on July 4th to show off. Second, down at the swap meet at the stadium, you get to meet and talk to all these service people from around the world, and that to me is cultural enrichment. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show. And before I get back to the news, I need to share a little consumer alert with you. There is a scam going on, and they just called me, being suspicious they didn't get anywhere. And the way the scam works, it's apparently being run out of Topeka, Kansas, or at least that's one of the phone hubs they're using. They call you up, tell you that you owe some ungodly amount of money, and if you don't pay it right now, the police are coming to get you, and then they ask you for your credit card information, at which point your credit card will be completely maxed out. So just be aware these scammers are out there. The government won't do a thing about it. Maybe the scammers are working for the government. We already know that the government is pillaging the people with civil forfeiture and land seizures. Stands to reason they'd be out pillaging the people with scam phone calls and ransomware and the rest of it. Now, getting back over to the war zone, Russian military have just delivered over 6 tons of aid to Hama and Aleppo to try and ease some of the horrible suffering that has hit the region during these 5 years of the U.S. trying to replace Bashar al-Assad. Of course, the U.S. continues to pour in all kinds of weapons, which seem to wind up in the hands of ISIS and al-Qaeda. Well, now the U.S. has a new piece of propaganda to convince you it's really okay, because the CIA is only sending the weapons to the moderate rebels. You know, the sweet-smelling rebels, as it were. But they're getting stolen, and they show up on the black market, and that's how ISIS and al-Qaeda are getting their hands on all this weaponry that the Syrian army keeps finding every time they take over another ISIS or al-Qaeda headquarters. Really, it's stolen. Yeah, we didn't mean for ISIS and al-Qaeda to get these weapons. Yeah, sure, these things happen. Now, over in Turkey, he's done a little bit of a kiss and make up with the Israelis over the Mavi Marmara. They're going to send a huge amount of money up there. How much the actual families get, we don't know. But there's a little bit of a wrinkle here, because one of the constitutional requirements to be president of Turkey is you must have a college degree, which sounds very reasonable to me. And apparently it has now been determined that Erdogan's college degree is a phony. It's a fake. It's an absolute fake. Now, hopefully Turkey is going to show a little bit more spine regarding ineligible presidents or candidates for president than our country does with regard to Ted Cruz, who cannot serve as president or vice president of the United States of America. All right, getting on to the economy here. The Brexit is estimated to have wiped $2 trillion off the global stock market between what happened Friday and what happened today. European banking stocks collapsed. Barclays and RBS shares had to be temporarily suspended. People are bailing on out there. China's devalued the yuan. And apparently the Standard & Poor's rating for Great Britain has been lowered, which may be more punishment than reality. Okay. Let's see. We're going to take a phone call. Shannon in Texas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Speaking of the IRS scam, I have been dealing with those clowns for the last 3 weeks, and had my phone number changed and thought the problem was gone. Today, first thing this morning, they started calling the new number. I've got an unlisted number, and I got to wonder how they're getting my number. But anyway, I know it's a scam, and I've actually star 69'd a bunch of the numbers that they call from. Apparently, they're spoofing the phone numbers they're calling with one of those caller ID things. But
could very well be the case. Could very well be the case. And again,
guys,
the alarming situation. And yes, they invoke the IRS, but you need to understand the IRS does not collect any money over the phone. So if somebody calls up and says, I'm from the IRS, and you need to make this payment, and I need your credit card information, it's not the IRS, it's a scammer. And what's really angering, the point I was trying to make is, these criminals are running rampant all across our society, and the government doesn't do a thing about it.
Yeah, and but anyway, so yeah, I was going to say what you just said, that I actually have a old classmate that works for the IRS, and they're well aware of that deal, and there's nothing they can do about it because they're calling from third world countries mostly, and Eastern Europe, and there's just not a thing they can do about it. But the IRS will never, ever, ever call you if you owe them money. They will send you mail, and if you ignore them, they may eventually send an agent to your door, or they may garnish your paycheck, but they will never call you on the phone about something. Now, they may return a call if you've called them, but they will never call you about.
But the important part is they do not attempt to collect money by credit card payment over the phone. And it's not just the IRS. They'll claim that they're from some bank, and they're this and they're that. And these scammers are running rampant. Now, you know, to me, it would make sense that we could block certain phone exchanges at the border. And I'm not buying this idea that you know, they can't do something about this. I think the fix is in. Somebody's making money off of this, and as long as it's making money, hey, we're just going to let it go. Anyway, Shannon, thank you very much for the phone call and the update.
Have a great day.
All right, same to you. Now, the Brexit has had an amazing effect on gold. Gold cleared $1,300 an ounce to a multi-year high after Brexit. People are looking for a haven. Gold jumped $70 an ounce on news of the Brexit. And everyone's out there talking about it's a disaster, it's a disaster, it's a disaster. Actually, no. It's a disaster for the money junkies, not for ordinary people. But the money junkies think the entire world ought to revolve around them and their wallets. And that's why they're out there saying, oh, it's a disaster, it's a disaster. And that kind of arrogance is nothing new. Look at the French Revolution. The reign of terror. Well, it was only a reign of terror if you were nobility, if you were that age's version of the money junkie. Other than that, everyone got along just fine. Now, for some reason, British banks are now refusing cash exchanges for British subjects traveling in Greece. And that may be in anticipation of a Grexit here. Now, over in Germany, the CEOs of all their car companies are saying, let's just carry on trading. You know, forget borders, forget the rest of it. We want to sell our cars to Great Britain without any barriers, without any tariffs, without any of this nonsense out of Brussels. And that may be the beginning of the end of Angela Merkel's EU-centric rule over Germany. Everybody wants to go back to peace through commerce. That's what's going on here. We're sick and tired of politics and saber rattling. We just want to have a decent job and a decent business. We want to make money so that we can take care of our families, and that's it. We don't need any more. Now, one of the big headaches for the Obama administration is with the Brexit, these transnational trade agreements are in serious trouble. And the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership will now no longer apply to Great Britain. It was supposed to be this universal, one-size-fits-all imposition of U.S. oligarchies. And Britain is now out of it. And they are being followed by France. The French Prime Minister, Valls, is saying, no, we're not going to sign this. It doesn't respect our needs and our interests. It's all about U.S. corporations and enforcing the world to basically run their economies to suit these American corporations, and that's it. Over in Germany, Alexander Gauland is saying, no, this is not going to work here. We're not going to do this. It doesn't work. Because this so-called free trade deal was anything but. And the people of Europe are going from a first-person experience, because the European Union supposedly began as a free trade zone all over Europe. And then Brussels got too big for its britches and started imposing all kinds of restrictions and tariffs and controls. Like curvy bananas. The free trade deals are not free trade. They're controlled trade, control for the benefit of the money junkies. All right, let's grab a phone call. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Yeah, this is, I said it before, a battle between globalism versus nationalism, but I think the globalists are starting to eat each other now. They're all taking sides. Britain knows they're getting out now because this is planet Titanic, Mike, and they're getting out now and first because they see the writing on the wall with the global economy, and they're trying to get their trade deals in order first. So I think that's what's going on. There's not going to be a second referendum, I'll tell you that.
Well, David Cameron says there's not going to be a second referendum. I think they're going to try and create some kind of a crisis, economic crash, fake terror attacks, something where Parliament will be able to say, well, look, we understand you want to leave, but really we have to vote to remain, because their problem is how to ignore the will of the people and still hang on to their jobs next election. Because we know that the actual Brexit vote was over 70-30 in favor of leave. And I'm sure these members of Parliament know that's the real number. And they don't want to go into re-election with almost two-thirds of the voters already wanting to pink slip them.
And that's another reason why there won't be another referendum, because that would require cheating again.
Yeah, and they got caught doing it this time. No, they're going to try and fight this in the Parliament. And but again, when you see some of the stuff that's coming out in the British media about violence against old people, not letting old people vote because they're not going to live with the consequences, and this idea of this new referendum. They're basically, they want to retroactively change the rules, saying, you know, there has to be 75% participation, there has to be a greater than 60% in one direction for it to be legitimate. Well, again, I don't know how the rules are set up in Great Britain, but here in the United States of America, there is a constitutional ban on ex post facto laws or regulations. You're not allowed to change the rules for past events, and yet that's what all these Remain people are trying to do. They say, we've got 3 million fraudulent signatures on a petition. You will change the rules so that referendum doesn't, count. And you almost get a sense of panic coming out of the Remain camp.
Oh, yeah. This is going to be a very crazy week for the stock market. But, most of the stock market doesn't really affect the majority of people except for 401ks. It's affecting the elites, though.
Yeah, this is all about the money junkies and how much they're suffering and how much they've lost. And apparently Soros took a major hit as well because he'd gone long on the British pound sterling. And so he took it in the teeth over that one. But again, the money junkies think the entire world should revolve around them and their wealth. And anybody who doesn't go along with that is just being unreasonable and intolerant and, anti-Semitic and racist and all whatever other names they can think of.
Oh, yeah, they're still pushing the media, the propaganda week of the globalist propaganda of it's the old people's fault and the young people, they stole my future. I'm like, your future is better to be away from the EU. These people, I granted there's some people that believe that, but the majority are paid trolls.
Of course they're all paid trolls. Look, the money junkies have worked for decades and spent billions, if not trillions, building this banker cage around the entire planet. And they're not going to let a little thing like the voters get in their way. Some of the propaganda is really out there. They're claiming this was all somehow engineered by Vladimir Putin. They're blaming ISIS. It really is ridiculous.
Yeah, I lost my wallet the other day, and I thought Putin took it.
It's Putin who's stealing the socks out of my dryer.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Now, over in Paris, believe it or not, after all this time, those protests, riots over their austerity are continuing. And Hollande is now out there threatening that he's going to, quote, go all the way, end quote. And I don't think he means what happens in the backseat of a car at the drive-in movie. He's basically issuing a veiled warning that if the French people don't shut up and go along with austerity, that he will uncork the army on them. That, I think, is going to make things a lot worse. Apparently, there was a protest in Paris. They arrested 95 people there. And it's taking a toll. The French police are now out there saying they're too tired to keep on policing these protests. They're simply too big and too many of them. So, now the French people are aware that France has deteriorated into a dictatorship. They've looked at how France is criminalizing dissent. They're criminalizing criticism of Israel. You can make fun of Muhammad all you want, but don't you dare say anything bad about Israel. And people understand when there are multiple standards there on freedom of speech, it's not free anymore. It's permitted speech. Now, over at the Wall Street Journal, they're saying that the Brexit means the Federal Reserve is likely to delay any potential rate increases. In fact, the markets are saying more than likely there'll be a rate cut. They're going to go further negative. So we'll see what's going to happen down there. Down in Venezuela, things have gotten so bad as their supply chains collapse. They're now putting armed guards on food trucks in Venezuela because they're hungry and they're stealing food. And this is what happens when one of these carefully crafted economic fascist dictatorships starts to come apart. And it will be worse in this country than it was in the 1930s, because in the 1930s, most Americans were still spread over the rural landscape. There were always farms nearby where you could grow food. There were always forests nearby where you could hunt game. Since then, we've all been corralled into these giant human farms called cities so that we don't have alternatives to the mandated corporate supply chain. And when it comes apart, things are going to be very, very ugly. Now, apparently a couple in New York who kept paper records of their bank accounts had their $25,000 savings account vanish into Chase Bank. Chase says, sorry, we can't find it. They're suing, and I'm sure that money is somewhere. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I'm getting a lot of email about these credit card scammers that are calling up. And never mind the issue about why the government doesn't do anything about it. Why isn't the corporate media sounding warnings on a regular basis about this? Why is this below their notice? They don't seem to care that people are being scanned. And it's a major epidemic, apparently, from what I'm seeing on the web. I have an idea, though, for the credit card companies. Should give people an option of restricting areas they'll accept a charge from, such as outside the United States of America. Just reject the charge completely. Now, early on, when credit card companies would handle fraud, they'd cover the losses so that you, the consumer, were protected. Unfortunately, that changed this last year. Credit card companies very, very quietly changed the policy, saying that if you are defrauded with your credit card, you will bear the losses. So, now then, let's talk a little bit about immigration, which was a major factor in the Brexit vote. And all of these pro-illegal immigrant, pro-refugee people are still out there saying, you're racist, you're intolerant. Not too long ago, it was discovered that through a watchdog, more than 1/3 of Vermont's resettled refugees test positive for infectious tuberculosis. Well, somebody went up to the Vermont Department of Health and said, just how many of these people have this? Remember, tuberculosis is a terrible disease. I'm old enough to remember when it was still in this country, and then it was eradicated. And everybody celebrated. Huzzah, huzzah. No more tuberculosis in the United States. They're back. And apparently the Vermont Department of Health refuses to say how many refugees have this contagious active tuberculosis. You don't need to know that. It makes the refugees look bad. Now, there is a internet censorship system called WebSense. And it's one of these things that you will subscribe to for your company or your home. It's a net nanny where certain websites will be blocked. And I discovered last week that WebSense was blocking my website under the single word explanation, intolerance. Now, I am pro-LGBT. I am anti-racism. And so the only intolerance I think that they're using is the fact that I believe in strong borders for this country, as did President Eisenhower, and that people who legally immigrate to the United States of America adopt to our language and culture, which was a position held by President Theodore Roosevelt. And if it turns out this is why WebSense blocked me, then they are using their system as a form of censorship to push a political agenda, which is a violation of my First Amendment rights to freedom of speech. I sent them a message asking if they wanted to comment. I never heard back from them. End of story. Got to take a break for top of the hour identification. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And a reminder that you can listen to this show or a replay of it at area code 605-562-5111. And we're still working on getting our new podcast system up. I hear it's going to be grand and glorious, and as soon as it's ready, we will let you know what's going on about that. Alrighty, getting on back to the news. Getting on back to immigration. The University of California system has now pledged $25 million for illegal immigrant scholarships. You legal U.S. citizens, you're just expected to go to the banks and get a student loan to pay for your education at usurious interest rates, with no promise of a high-paying job on graduation with which to pay that money back. But the illegal immigrants who shouldn't be here in the first place are going to get a free ride. Now then, as you're probably hearing all over the media, they're having major, record-setting floods all across West Virginia. It's a federal disaster zone, 24 dead so far. It's a very ugly situation. I've been through a flood once myself. They're very, very traumatic. Everybody's saying, what's going on? What's going on? Well, it's really very simple. Do you remember back in the year 2000 when the Carbonazis told us snowfalls were a thing of the past? Well, they lied. There was snow this last winter. A lot of it. And it's melting. And that's why West Virginia is underwater right now. They weren't prepared for it because policy was being set on human-caused global warming and snow is a thing of the past. Now, getting on over to the Democratic Party platform, I am not kidding you. Part of the Hillary Clinton Democratic Party platform calls for prosecuting global warming skeptics. If I point out to you how we had snow here on the Big Island a week ago, I could be subject to prosecution. If we point out the fact that below the equator, which is the middle of their winter, they're not only getting snow, they're getting record levels of snow. Oh, no, you've got to be prosecuted for that. Does that sound like freedom of speech to you? Doesn't to me. Okay, now let's see. The Senate just approved the new defense bill. The National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2017 includes the provision for women to register for the draft to be drafted into combat. They're gearing up for the war. Now, last week, as you're probably aware, the Supreme Court let stand a lower court ruling that basically said Obama's 2014 Deferred Action for Parents of Americans and Lawful Permanent Residence policy was unconstitutional because he just wrote that off of his desk. And it was declared unconstitutional, and the Supreme Court, because they tied, since Scalia is not around anymore, let that lower court ruling stand. And Obama threw a tantrum, and the tantrum is continuing because according to a story out of IntelliHub, Obama is planning on ignoring the Supreme Court. He is going to refuse to deport illegal immigrants. Now that to me is a failure of his duty as the chief executive of the executive branch. His job is not to issue orders but to obey them. And he's absolutely failing. He's standing up there saying, I'm not going to do what Congress told me to do. I'm not going to do what the Supreme Court tells me to do. I'm not going to do what the people tell me to do. It's amazing stuff here. Okay, the intelligence community is getting ready to evaluate their relationship with Hollywood. And Senators Richard Burr and Dianne Feinstein have included an amendment to the annual intelligence spending bill that calls for the Director of National Intelligence to submit annual reports to congressional oversight committees detailing how the CIA and 15 other intelligence agencies interact with the entertainment industry. Now, this is nothing new. Intelligence agencies have been trying to control Hollywood all along, long before he was head of the FBI. J. Edgar Hoover was out there in Hollywood trying to say, you should make these kind of movies, you shouldn't make these other kind of movies. He actually got into an argument with Charlie Chaplin, because many of Charlie Chaplin's movies portrayed government officials as oafish buffoons. And Chaplin did that because that was what his audience wanted to see. That was then as now the common perception of a government worker as an oafish buffoon. And J. Edgar Hoover went on out to Charlie Chaplin and said, no, you have to make movies that show government officials as really great people. And Chaplin basically laughed at him. And J. Edgar Hoover was instrumental in getting Charlie Chaplin's citizenship revoked in revenge. And when Chaplin came back to the United States to receive his Lifetime Achievement Award at the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, it took a special act of Congress to let him into the country to pick up his award. All right, shout out to our on-air affiliates rejoining us right now. We're talking about how the U.S. government wants reports on how intelligence agencies interact with and control Hollywood and, by extension, TV, newspapers, and so forth. We know it's been going on a long time. Operation Mockingbird is one known example. And we're talking about how J. Edgar Hoover was trying to arm twist Charlie Chaplin, the silent movie star, up until The Great Dictator, to make movies that showed government people in the best possible light. And it didn't begin and end with Charlie Chaplin. There was a movie called The FBI Story, and it starred Jimmy Stewart, who was a very fine actor. And what most people don't know is J. Edgar Hoover was actually on that soundstage every single day telling the director how to direct the movie to make the FBI look really good. He was obsessed with the FBI's public image. And Hoover actually appears briefly in the film as a cameo from the rear only. But that's how intense it was and still is. It's going to be a very thick report if they're honest about what's going on. And I worked in Hollywood for a lot of years, and I saw it time and time again. The place has got more spooks than the Haunted Mansion down in Disneyland. Okay, story out of Patriot Rising, and I concur with this one. We're coming up on the 20th anniversary of TWA Flight 800. And this article is saying it's time for an honest investigation. Well, we've already had one here in the independent media. We know we were lied to. We know there were witnesses who saw a missile rise up from a confirmed ongoing test of the U.S. Navy's Aegis CEC system. I reject the call for a new media or government investigation. It just gives them another chance to polish the lies. We know we were lied to. We know that plane was tragically shot down by accident during a military exercise, and it happens alarmingly on a regular basis. The United Nations acknowledges at least 25 shoot-downs by accident of passenger jets by the military. Most remain classified. Obviously, it was going to be very hard to keep a lid on that shoot-down of the Iranian Airbus by the USS Vincent. But again, we know the government lied, and we don't need to go over the fine details any longer. It's time for the American people to stand up and say, we are tired of a government and a corporate media that lies to us about everything to get our money and our obedience and the life and limb of our children for wars. Getting on back to education and all of this free scholarship money for illegal immigrants at a time when legal American citizens are having to go deep into debt for their education. You kind of have to wonder why they even bother. Over at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, they've issued a politically correct guide this week that declared Christmas vacation is a microaggression. Telling a woman, I love your shoes, is a microaggression. Everything you do is a microaggression. Stop thinking, stop talking. Just cast your eyes downward and be obedient. Then you'll be politically correct. All right, we're going to grab a phone call. John in Barbados, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Yes, I just want to go back briefly to the Brexit. People in the UK now have awoken to the nonsense that they're fed by the mainstream and corporate media. And I think you published that little opinion poll after the event of the Brexit, which showed that the people really do want to exit. I think 75-point-something% against 25-point-something%. So there we go. People are wised up, and I think this is now putting pressure on Cameron to go earlier. According to what I've been reading in today's nonsense, is that yes, he may go by September the 2nd. So, and the thing is, what is being demanded is that a Brexiteer becomes Prime Minister to negotiate this exit from the EU. And it gives me great pleasure to see that George Soros lost a load of money on...
Let's all feel bad for George Soros. Oh. Do you know George Soros is the greatest argument on earth for socialism? Because it shows how people with too much money can just really mess up the place for the rest of us.
Anyway, so I'm looking at another story where, according to reports coming out of the SAA, the Syrian news agency, a huge effort now is going ahead with Russian air power and the Syrian Arab army to clear Aleppo province rapidly of these Takfiris and what have you. And it looks very likely that in Iraq as well they're having great success, and Fallujah is now entirely free, and they can now concentrate on Mosul. It's things are moving in the wrong direction for Mr. Obama's foreign policy.
Okay, we're back. Okay, can you hear me?
Yep, you're much better now, Michael.
Okay, all right, absolutely. Our connection is back here, and I don't know whether some critter was gnawing on the wire or something. Okay, so we've got about another minute and a half here, John. What do you want to say?
Well, as I said, I was looking at these particular aspects of the Middle East, and the U.S. foreign policy is just falling apart. I mean, I hope you like that little collage of photographs with Mr. Cameron and Bashar al-Assad.
Oh, I love that. I used it. Everybody was commenting on it. They thought it was funny as all heck. And for those who missed it on the website, it was basically David Cameron saying, Assad must go. And then the next panel, it's Assad saying, who must go? And that's followed by the picture of David Cameron as he resigned, followed by a picture of Assad grinning from ear to ear to ear.
Yes, I thought it was most appropriate.
Oh, yeah. And I imagine he's very, very happy about that. Okay?
I mean, yep. Well, I think this interruption has confused me. I've lost track of where I wanted to go.
Well, that makes two of us because, yeah, and I don't know if it's living in a third world country and the infrastructure is just absolutely not reliable. Okay?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. At least we have a good one here. We have 5 major cables from Barbados to Africa, to Europe, to Britain, and to America. So we've got plenty of connection everywhere.
All right. Well, we got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the phone call, John. We'll be back with another phone call after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go to the phones. Andrea in Oklahoma. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes. You were talking about Venezuela and how they don't have things to eat. Well, here in the United States, in over 39 states, we are being plagued by a huge problem, and it's called wild pigs. They're everywhere. There's estimated that there's 5 to 8 million pigs, and each sow can produce 2 or 3 litters a year. And they could have maybe 20 little babies, if not more. But we're being overrun, and it's open season, pig season. If you want to go hunting for pig, and some of them are Russian boar because they brought them over back in the 1700s.
Well, that's a great food source. I mean, we're coming up on a possible disruption of our supply chains. Yeah, go on out and get get one of these pigs if it's open season. Take it, put it in the freezer or smokehouse. Deal with no electricity. No, there's a lot of pig hunting here in the island of Hawaii because a lot of pigs were brought in by the ancient Polynesians and they've gone wild. We actually had a bunch of them came in and interrupted our set during we were filming on Lost, and all of a sudden these pigs just came out of the woods and wandered on around saying, "What are you doing here?" Now, the rules are very, very simple. You're not allowed to use firearms, but you are allowed to use bow and arrow.
Well, here in the States, you can use whatever because it's a plague. I mean, they're tearing up crops. They're tearing trees down. They're just destroying Arkansas, Oklahoma, Texas, New Mexico. It just goes on and on. Over 39 states are being destroyed by pigs. But the other thing that you had said... nominate you for vice president. Well, I did that last week. I went on to Donald Trump's website and nominated you that you'd be an excellent vice president. So I think if all the Rivero Rangers get together and do that, maybe we'll have one of the best vice presidents ever.
Well, thank you very much here. I just settled for Donald Trump giving my show a call here and saying hello to all of his supporters who are out here on WhatReallyHappened.com and the website.
Well,
okay.
Like I said, you'd be the best. You are so knowledgeable, and I think the two of you together, we could turn this country around and make it what it used to be.
All right. Well, listen, thank you very much here. We're going to let you go. And getting on to the situation here with Orlando. There's been an interesting little development. And as it turns out, this is being reported in a couple of different places. There's a YouTube video out about it as well. And do you remember when Orlando first happened and the chief of police came on out and said there was a possibility that some of the people in the Pulse nightclub may have been shot by the police during that final siege? Well, it turns out that apparently, following the altercation in the parking lot outside the club, there were no gunshots fired inside the club until 5:13 a.m. when the SWAT team made its entrance. So this image of Omar Mateen walking around and shooting people while texting and Facebooking and all the rest of it, it didn't happen. No gunfire was heard until the SWAT entry, and it raises the possibility that Omar Mateen and all those people inside the club were actually shot by the police forces. And it's not a nonsensical idea. Remember that shootout at the Empire State Building a couple of years ago? 9 bystanders shot, all by the police. So, now as you know, the propaganda regarding Orlando has been all over the place, and nowhere more so than what was his motive. Because originally it came on, there was, it was an attack on the gay club. He hated gays. The gay men had been kissing in front of him, and he was outraged. And then you find out he himself was gay, was a regular at the club. Then it came on out, they said, well, it was a revenge killing because one of the club patrons had given him AIDS. And then the FBI came out a few days later and said, we've found absolutely no evidence he was gay. This had to be an ISIS terror attack. And they're all over the place. And now they're at the point saying, we'll never know what his motive was. Just give us your guns and all will be well. We'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to our show here. So we're talking about what happened down in Orlando and how the story keeps mutating over time to the point where nobody's going to believe anything that's being said about it. At first, he hated gays, and no, he was gay himself. All right, had to be ISIS, and nobody can confirm. In fact, the CIA came on out and said there's no links from this guy to ISIS, even though that remains the official story. It's an act of terror. But there is something else going on, because people who knew Omar Mateen are saying he went through a dramatic personality change just weeks before Orlando. And apparently he was researching prescription psychiatric medication online. Now, we don't know if he was on something or not, but we do know that one of the symptoms of these prescription psychiatric medications is serious personality alteration. And it seems like this may be a part of it. Either he was put on prescription psychiatric medication or he was being covertly fed something to turn him into this robot killer for political gain. And of course, behind it all, it's always the gun grabbers. Oh, it's the gun grabbers. It's the gun grabbers. We've got to take the guns and everything will be fine. There are terrorists out there who want to kill you, so surrender your weapons and all will be well. Which doesn't make any sense. It absolutely does not. And we've got another story out there on the front of WhatReallyHappened.com about a mother came home with her kids, found a stranger in the house, shot him dead. Good for her. Now, out here in Hawaii, they have become the first state to automatically submit all gun owners to the FBI database. The good news is the database is stored on Lois Lerner's hard drive. And here's where it gets just a little weird. This gun-grabbing thing is very hypocritical. They want your guns. They don't want to give up theirs. And apparently there are all these Hollywood stars have signed a petition for Congress to ban guns. And yet all of these people are surrounded by armed bodyguards. Guns are good for them. Bad for you. Now, over at CNN, they were interviewing Eric Pratt, trying to get him to commit to this idea that, 30,000 gun deaths a year is really way too much. And he put them in their place by saying, first of all, at least 10,000 of those are suicides. And if they don't have guns, they'll find something else to use. And then he came on out with the actual statistics that for every one negative consequence of the use of a firearm, there are dozens of times where guns have been used to save lives. And the talking bimbo kept saying, no, we don't want to hear about guns saving lives. I want to focus only on the death rate, the killing, and the murder is out of control. And Eric came on out and said that gun ownership in this country has skyrocketed in recent years. And the CNN bimbo was out there saying, see, it's a problem and the murder rate's going through the roof. And Pratt came on back and said, no, according to the FBI, the murder rate is going down as the American people acquire the means to protect themselves. In fact, while the U.S. is very high in terms of personal firearm ownership, they're not very high in murder rates at all. We're not even in the top 100 gun homicide list. It's very, very clear. I mean, look at Honduras, strictest gun control out there, highest per capita murder rate in the world. Look at how many people are being killed up there in Detroit, which is held aloft as the gun grabber's paradise. Contrast that with Vermont, which has very relaxed gun laws and a very low per capita murder rate. What's going on here is these gun grabbers aren't concerned about your health and safety. They're worried about their own skins because they are addicted to your money and they don't want to confront their addiction. It's just easier to go on plundering the nation and disarming them so the plunder can proceed apace. Now, here's where it gets really, really interesting. Charlie Rangel came on out and absolutely said to the Daily Caller that only politicians need firearms for protection. And he was responding to all these people saying, you've got all these gun-grabbing politicians like Dianne Feinstein who themselves carry weapons. And so Rangel came on out and said, only politicians need firearms for protection. The rest of you, you're just a giant open-air shooting gallery for political gain. And a reminder, Charlie Rangel was just found guilty on 11 out of 13 corruption charges. The gun grabbers are trying to protect their corruption. That's what this is all about. It's not about crime. It's not about safety. It's about maintaining control so they can go on looting and plundering the nation with wild, reckless abandon. Now, over in Pennsylvania, Congressman Shaka Fatah has been convicted on 22 counts of corruption. He submitted his resignation. And it gets even better than that, because an Arizona Democratic lawmaker, Representative Cecilia Velasquez, only months after voting down a law that would have imposed stricter controls on welfare, has been convicted of food stamp fraud herself. They are all crooked. Story coming out of the Express.com, and this ties back to what I was saying earlier about the phone call, saying, don't open that email from your bank, it could be a scam. And they're saying British banking customers are being targeted by a vicious new computer virus that is activated when they open up this email, and it launches a Trojan that steals all of your personal details and sells them to the highest bidder. Avast has found that NatWest and Barclays users are infected with this thing. Anyway. Now, a little bit of good news. Apparently, there is a woman who sued Microsoft for the forced upgrade to Windows 10. This really does need a class action lawsuit. Came in, discovered her computer had upgraded without her permission, destroyed a bunch of data, rendered her older applications no longer usable, and she sued and she won. $10,000 judgment. And I think that's a very, very good thing. Because I'm an old guy. And when I was a kid, the way you did business is you offer to sell your customer what the customer wants. And you make your product as good as it can be for a reasonable price, and that's commerce. We live in a world today where government and corporate interests have aligned together, the classic definition of fascism, to force you to buy things you may not want and can't use. Whether it's upgrade to Windows 10 to force you onto the month-to-month rental model, forced vaccines. And by the way, California has now come out with a vaccine mandate for adults, not just the school children. If you're an adult in California and you don't have your vaccine papers in order, you can be criminally prosecuted. GMOs, all this stuff. They're keeping the economy going by ordering people to buy more and more and more things, whether they want them or not, whether they're safe or not. It's completely out of control. But I'm glad she won the lawsuit. I think there needs to be a class action lawsuit against Microsoft for all the damage it's done to the American people, the American computer users. And I remember when Claire was starting this choir season, and by the way, she had the season finale yesterday, and it went really well. We had a computer, Windows 7, and to be fair to Microsoft and Windows, which is why I can't join a class action lawsuit, I allowed it to upgrade to Windows 10. It was an unmitigated disaster. It erased all of her music files, not moved into the recycle bin. I'm talking about gone, vanished. And I exercised the revert to your previous operating system, and as it turns out, it's not a perfect reversion. And that laptop has been crippled ever since. Fortunately, thanks to the generosity of one of our listeners, we have a new choir support computer. And that old computer, it's sitting in a closet in case we need some kind of a backup machine of some sort. But we're hearing these stories all over. People who had companies set up where they need to have Windows 7 and Windows 8 machines to check whether the apps they're writing will work on all these platforms, and they come on in and all of a sudden everything's a Windows 10 machine. Microsoft has caused huge amounts of economic damage to our country at a time when we cannot afford it. And there does need to be a class action lawsuit. Somebody needs to remind our current generation of corporate leaders of the wisdom of the old saying, the customer is always right. Because right now the attitude seems to be the customer doesn't know what they want, we will decide for them, even if it doesn't work. And that's really what it comes on down to. If Windows 10 were a solid, reliable operating system, people wouldn't be as resistant. But we've been down this road with Microsoft so many times. They'll get an operating system to the point where all the bugs that it was released with are finally taken care of, and they trash it and release a new operating system with thousands and thousands of bugs in it. And we're all working as unpaid quality assurance inspectors from Microsoft to identify these and send them on in. And then when they finally get that working, they throw it out and come out with a new one. And it's making them huge amounts of money, and it's costing us productivity. Because every minute that we are sitting at our computers trying to fix Microsoft's problem is a minute we are not doing what it is we get paid to do. And that's a very, very ugly situation for us all to be in. Most small businesses are just barely hanging on. They can't afford the lost productivity that comes with these poor operating systems, this enforced update. Anyway. All right, getting on to some of the medical issues. The National Cancer Institute has very quietly confirmed cannabis can cure cancer. But don't tell anybody, because those big pharmaceutical corporations don't want you to know. Because they want to go on selling you chemotherapy and radiation treatments. But the National Cancer Institute is saying, yeah, actually it turns out cannabis can cure cancer. It has medicinal value. But they don't like it. You know why? Because you can grow it in your backyard. They don't want you to be able to grow your own food, grow your own medicine in the backyard. They can't make money off of you with that. And that's what they're all about. Remember, the CEO of Nestle was out there saying that there's no natural right to water. It's got to be commoditized and sold to you. Really, what about the rain coming out of the sky? Oh, well, we're going to make it illegal to collect that. You'll be forced to be dependent on the corporations. Now, obviously, we're coming up on Independence Day, and we're going to be talking about that later in the week. And I do want to remind everybody, I'm going to go ahead and repost this article that I wrote a couple of weeks ago about why that Declaration of Independence is as relevant today in our current circumstances as it was in 1776. And it's all about that enforced dependency. You will buy your cloth from this company. You will buy your water from here. You'll buy your coffee and tea from this company. You're not allowed a choice. You will be made dependent on the king's buddies, so the king's buddies can make more money off of you. All right, let's grab a phone call. Ron in Montana, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. I have a question for you on Windows 10. I'm a Korean veteran. I'm losing my eyesight, and the VA has given me a computer that has software on it that will read to me.
Yes.
I have Windows 7 Professional. They're going to give me another computer, and the guy that I'm working with insists that I go with Windows 10. What is your opinion?
Well, if they're paying for it and giving it to you, and you're just using it to read and send documents, I think you're going to be okay because they're delivering to you a system that is hopefully going to be running just fine. My concern is for people and companies like myself that do or used to do computer animation, or my wife's composing, because forcing her to Windows 10 breaks a lot of her existing applications, which were perpetual licenses. And one of the reasons Microsoft is forcing Windows 10, they want to get rid of perpetual licenses so that you are paying for your software month to month to month to month, which means they don't have to start developing improved products to get your money. The money's going to be flowing in anyway. But in your particular circumstance, I'm not seeing a strong reason not to just go ahead with the new machine.
I do have one other question on anything that I store on the computer. Does it go into the cloud?
You're going to have to look at the settings, but yeah, they're pushing the cloud on that as well. I don't know what you're planning on storing on the computer, but I would actually get like a USB hard drive or a flash drive and just keep everything on that and unplug it from the computer when you're not using it.
Yeah, well, I'm like you, Michael. I do a lot of research as far as the Constitution and government and stuff like that, and probably some pretty sensitive stuff, but it doesn't sound like it's going to hurt too much.
Well, let me ask you a question. Are they taking back the Windows 7 machine when they give you the Windows 10 machine?
No.
Then air gap that Windows 7 machine and keep your private documents on that.
I thought about that. Yeah, I was thinking I might do that. Yeah.
Okay?
Okay, well, thank you for the advice, Michael.
All right, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Interesting article coming out of Natural News. While you were distracted by Brexit, Monsanto's puppets in the U.S. Senate announced a compromise bill to outlaw GMO labeling laws nationwide. They finally got this law through. You're not allowed to know what you're eating. Just trust us. It'll be good for you. More when we come back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show coming up on the top of the hour here. So we're talking about how while everybody was distracted with Brexit, the Senate has announced a compromise regarding the bill to outlaw GMO labeling laws nationwide. The compromise is that GMO products are going to be labeled with a barcode, which means unless you're carrying a scanner with you, we've got an app for that, I hope, you're not going to know. The whole point of a label is for the consumer to pick something up at the supermarket and say, oh, this has got GMO, I don't want it. A barcode is just a way of saying, okay, you've got GMO labeling, but we're still going to sell you the product because most people can't interpret the barcode. It's pretty absurd. Now then, interesting little story coming out of the Daily Mail. Apparently over in New York, Dr. David Newman of Montclair, New Jersey, has been charged with 5 counts of sexual abuse against 4 patients while working at the Mount Sinai Hospital in Manhattan. And apparently, and again, I have to be very, very careful because I don't want the FCC to come down on our affiliates. But apparently, he was giving these women much stronger anesthesia than he told them to knock them out, and then engaged in a sex act with them. And the evidence shows that, yes, he did do this. And I'm wondering, is that covered by Obamacare? I'm kind of wondering, or does that come under the deductible, as it were? Alrighty, now Bruce Allen Darroch, 51, is a former principal of a school sentenced for child porn, and apparently was also convicted of 2 counts of failing to assist in a search warrant after refusing to give police passwords to encrypted devices found in his home and his car. Now, kind of neutral on that one. I think passwords to encrypted devices are covered by that Fifth Amendment. By the way, did you know that the police are now starting to train sniffer dogs to detect the smell of this chemical that's used in flash drives? It's a chemical that the actual memory is immersed in to conduct heat away from the memory chip to the outer case as a coolant. And apparently it has a very unique odor that dogs can be trained to detect. So the idea being that if they go into your home and they think there's a flash drive hidden someplace with your plans for a nuclear bomb, the dog, in theory, will find it. I stress in theory because too many of these sniffer dogs have been exposed as responding to cues by the handler rather than actually finding whatever is going on. But it's just something good to know if you have something on your flash drive, like your Aunt Mary's top secret chocolate chip cookie recipe, that you don't think the police have any business knowing. Got to take a break for our top of the hour station identification. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443. Now, another little case going on over here. A former child, youth, and family caregiver, Frank Russell Walmsley, has been sentenced to 22 years imprisonment for the sexual abuse he did to 4 children in the Thames Street family home, which he ran from 1995 until 2000. And the jury basically deliberated for 16 hours before locking him up. Now, obviously, I have some very, very strong feelings about this issue. But at the same time, I'm having to step back here and look at just how prevalent these prescription psychiatric medications have become in our society. 25% of the population of the United States are on these. It's even higher than that for police. There was a study done down in Florida showing how many police officers are on these medications. Certainly a lot of them being munched on over there in Washington, D.C. And I have to look at this growing incidence of bizarre behavior in our society and ask if, in point of fact, we are medicating ourselves crazy with these drugs. Now, they've already acknowledged SSRIs do not actually help in depression, especially with young people. They're grudgingly acknowledging there is some kind of a problem with people who are on these medications having very, very poor impulse control. They just go with whatever feels good at the moment. One of the stories over at ssristories.org that always caught my attention was there was a perfectly normal high school kid was diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which is a made-up fictitious disease according to the guy who came up with it. And they put him on this medication, and then all of a sudden he attempts suicide. And they got to this kid in time. And when it was all over, they said, "Why'd you try and kill yourself?" And he said, "I don't know. The idea just popped into my head, and I couldn't help myself. Now, obviously, violence and suicide call attention to themselves, but there are other behaviors that seem to be spinning out of control. A while back, I did a study on the per capita incidence of domestic violence and found that there was a surge in that, correlating with the introduction of these medications into our culture. The more people were on these antidepressants, the more per capita incidence of domestic abuse, more violence in the streets, more bar fights, road rage incidents. They're all going up. All to make money for the pharmaceutical industry. I think we need to take a very good look at this. We know these medications are being sold to treat diseases that don't really exist. The psychiatric industrial complex, if you will, are making money by declaring all kinds of normal human behavior to be a mental illness for which they have a treatment. Whether it works or not, whether it's harmful or not, it's big business. It's big bucks. If you want to avoid eating GMO food, you suffer from the mental illness of orthorexia nervosa. I'm sure they have a pill for that. It's probably a Big Mac, dehydrated and shoved in a capsule. I'm looking at all these incidents of child molestation and bizarre behavior by doctors toward their patients. There seems to be a lot of it today, and I think there's a common cause. I think we're seeing the symptoms of too many of these prescription psychiatric medicines being in our society. Certainly police violence against innocent Americans has gone up as these cops are on these medications. And I've commented before, the quality of thinking coming out of Washington, D.C. over the last couple of decades has not been very good at all. And I think there's an issue there, and it needs to be looked at. I think it's a public health crisis, these medications. And we better do something about it, or we're just going to wind up being seen as completely psychotic people to the rest of the world. Look at what those Americans are doing now. Okay, let's see. We're going to grab a phone call. Sheldon in Washington State. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, just walked in, heard you talk about politicians and doing business, and the customer's always right. Then I went out. I guess you had a break. You've changed topics. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
When I used to do business in the 50s, there was a lot of fear there. And the fear wasn't for us, the customer. The fear was from the proprietor because they would bend over backwards. They didn't want anything going wrong, especially if it was a mom and pop or a personally owned enterprise, you know?
Okay, listen, we need to take a second here to welcome our on-air affiliates back to our network. We're discussing economics, we're discussing business ethics, and how over the decades we've evolved from a culture in which the customer is always right and companies were held liable for the mistakes and harm their products caused, and today it's completely different.
Well, just an example of that, I'll try to make this quick. I bought a rig, and you buy other people's used problems, so I spent $3,000 on an engine, $2 more for an exhaust system and to have it installed. I got 707 miles out of my $5,000 investment. The guy says, "Oh, must have been a builder." Well, I'll slap you one together and give me $800. Well, all I had to trade him was an identical Blazer running that was like the one he put it in. And I did that. I got 200 miles out of that one. And I'm not going to go back a third time and expect different results, but these people just expect you to keep handing out money. And it's not just all Chinese merchandise. There are Caucasians in my state that, oh, well, too bad, so sad. Now what do you want to buy? Anyway, thanks for your time. Thanks for listening.
No, you're absolutely right. And it's planned obsolescence, especially as the economy tightens up. Businesses do not want products to last. They want you to keep on having to come back and buy the same thing over and over and over again. I remember when my wife and I had that Nissan Xterra, and it was one of the ones that was assembled in Tennessee, and that thing was just one problem after the other, after the other, after the other. And apparently, if you want an Xterra that's actually assembled in Japan, you have to special order it. I mean, that's just how completely wacko this is. And I remember when the LED bulbs first started coming out, and the package says, this will last you 15 years, and the brand that I was using, which has since gone out of business, I might add, they were good for maybe 2 to 3 months, the same as a regular light bulb. They don't want things to last. They need you to keep coming back and giving more and more and more of your money. And the old adage used to be, buy quality because then you don't have to replace it again, but you can't even do that anymore. You go down to the store and you say, I want a high quality, durable, reliable. No, it's all the same stuff, all the same price. One of the ones that used to annoy me were these electronic, computerized coffee machines where you'd load it up with the coffee and everything when you went to bed, and the next morning your coffee would be ready. And they're wonderfully convenient, but that little basket for the coffee would tear after maybe 3 or 4 months. It's incredibly thin, and the stores never had the replacement. They're out there somewhere, but we can't get them. But you can buy a new, you can buy a new coffee machine here. And there's a wonderful documentary out there called Pyramids of Waste. Also goes by the name of The Light Bulb Conspiracy. And they're talking about how there is literally a chip in your computer printer that counts the number of pages you have printed, and then it sends a signal saying something broke down in your printer. Take it in for servicing. And you take your printer in, and they say, well, it's going to cost you more to repair it than to just buy a new one. And it just goes on and on and on. Anyway, Sheldon, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go and switch over to Clint in Ohio. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, I'm calling about the Brexit, and I just want to let you know, everybody keeps on talking about the rigging. I saw it happen. It was probably about 2 hours in, and what happened was it was 51 for leave and 48, to stay, and then the percentage, and then I refreshed it, and it flipped the numbers. So it's just like people say, they flipped the numbers, and then what happened was they're hoping that the leave wouldn't overwhelm it, but, all you saw was the leave go up and the remains go down. The whole night, it just kept on doing that, except for that one incident where they flipped the numbers. So, for everybody that's voting for Trump or you don't want Hillary, you got to get out there and vote if you really don't want Hillary, because they're going to flip the numbers, and if we don't overwhelm it, she's going to win.
You're absolutely right. I mean, we already know this is a crooked election. There are already lawsuits. Virtually every one of the Democratic state primaries so far has had complaints filed against it for voter suppression or other outright fraud. If there's one thing that Brexit did prove is a landslide by the people can overcome election rigging, because it's one thing to shift the outcome of an election a few percentage points, but when you try and reverse a landslide, everybody knows that's what you did.
Well, that's exactly what they do, is they flip the numbers and hope that we don't overwhelm the flip. And that's what they did in Europe, is they overwhelmed, or in Britain, is they overwhelmed the flip, and they couldn't do anything about it. So, when people say their vote doesn't matter, if you don't want Hillary out there, be part of the numbers that overwhelm them so they can't rig it.
Absolutely.
Thank you for everything, and have a good day.
All right, well, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Ali in Idaho. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I'm just calling about those SSRIs you were just discussing. I have a friend of mine, a very good friend of mine that works in the medical insurance industry, and it is absolutely true. I mean, she says the applicants and participants in all these health screenings, they're taking the SSRIs, and at least 25 to 30% of them are. And the other thing is, her daughter is in the Air Force, and her boyfriend had real bad PTSD, and they had him on like 4 or 5 different SSRIs, and he ended up shooting himself in the head.
Oh, man, I am so sorry.
It traumatized the daughter, and so now the daughter has PTSD, and she's been put on it by the Air Force. So the military's just handing it out like candy.
Well, the Pentagon is spending more on medications than they do on Black Hawk helicopters.
Oh, that's disgusting.
I agree.
Yeah. Well, anyway, just wanted to share that. Thank you very much, Mike. Great show.
Oh, well, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Dan in Canada. Aloha, Dan. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
There's a woman that was talking about all the pigs running around the States, but
yes.
She forgot to mention Washington, D.C.
Well, see, there the pigs are supposed to be there because supposedly they won the election and it's their turn at the trough.
Exactly. The tumbling stocks, this is proof that the globalism agenda is a bad idea.
The globalism agenda was always a bad idea for ordinary people. The globalism agenda is all about enslaving mankind to a permanent state of debt servitude to a global private central bank. And the problem with any private central bank, global or otherwise, is by design it manufactures more debt than money to pay that debt. Once you are their slaves, it doesn't matter how hard you work, how much you sacrifice, you can never pay that debt off. The only way that you can get out of it is you have to do what Andrew Jackson did. You shut it down.
Exactly. I was going to mention something about, I know you're on this. It's called Google Plus, and I've been using it for a while. I don't use Facebook at all, but you'll see something in the feed, and it'll be like an anti-Trump post, and all of a sudden it gets like deemed hot and recommended by Google Plus. So suddenly thousands of people will have it in their feed.
Oh yeah, well we're seeing that on Google Plus, Facebook. All of these media outlets are very firmly on Hillary's side. They're openly censoring anti-Hillary comments or pro-Trump comments. It's just out there. And again, we know from some of the released emails from Hillary Clinton, they're on board voluntarily. They're cooperating with her because she's probably made some promises about guaranteeing their market monopoly or shutting out their competition or tax breaks or whatever. I mean, she's giving away the candy store to everybody who will help her.
Yeah, it looks like Google it's becoming the Orwellian Ministry of Truth all of a sudden. It's horrible.
Well, it has actually been for quite a while. The same thing with YouTube. As you know, I do these music videos for Claire's Music, and we'll put them out there, and some of them have political content, like In Times of War, which is one of the best things she ever wrote. And we'll see the view numbers go up, and all of a sudden they're knocked down so that it can't go into that upper area where it starts getting recommended. We've caught them, artificially lowering the numbers many times. In fact, we caught them at one time where the video had more likes than views.
Yeah, I don't know. They're just being used for they're trying to sway our opinions and propagandize us.
Well, that's what they get the money for. That's what all the corporate media gets paid to do, is to control what we're thinking. And they're out to prove that they can do it, because on the day when they can't, all the multi-million-dollar goodies are going to go away.
This Trump assassination attempt sounded kind of phony. Like, this kid apparently wanted to kill Trump for over a year. Like, Trump wasn't on anybody's radar a year ago. He couldn't get arrested for it. He couldn't get a parking ticket. So maybe they're just trying to, prime us for when Trump accidentally walks through a kitchen pantry or, travels through Dallas in an open-top car. There'll be some lone nut.
Yep.
And we'll just think, I guess that was just one of those things.
Yeah.
One quick thing I heard on RT today, Erdogan from Turkey has come out and apologized for shooting down that Russian jet, and wants to get normalized ties with Russia again. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was interesting.
Well, Erdogan is trying to figure out some way to get Russia to stop bombing those convoys of stolen oil coming out of Syria, and I don't think Putin is going to go along with that, because Putin understands this is what's funding these terrorists inside Syria. So I don't think he's going to back off.
Just one quick request. I was talking to a couple of people. They said they kind of agreed. You should do like a third hour on-air guest and have John from Barbados on. Just kind of curious about how he became aware of things, and just a suggestion.
Okay, well.
Anyways, I'll let you go.
All right, thanks an awful lot here. And, John calls into the show on a pretty regular basis. And I don't know if we need to do an entire hour, but we'll certainly float the idea along. Okay, we're going to go to Nancy in New Jersey. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, I just wanted to relay something that I saw about the Brexit vote. I heard that a lot of people were using their cell phones to take pictures of their ballots.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that'd be a great idea for us to do when we're voting this season.
Well, it would be. What we're missing, though, is an audit trail that goes from the voting machine or the ballot box all the way up to the top. And it really is a national disgrace. But, they coming out of the Brexit, they did catch that one video of one of the poll workers erasing ballots and remarking them. And that's why everybody got really upset, because the polling places only had these graphite pencils. They weren't allowing pens. In fact, a woman showed up with pens and was actually taken away by the police. Like I said, they really thought they were going to successfully steal this election. But if the numbers on that poll about whether Parliament should go along with the will of the people are any measure, the actual outcome was 70-30 in favor of leave, and the election fraud wasn't able to overcome that.
Yeah, that was pretty obvious. And it's going to be interesting to see what they do with this, because they are pulling out all the stops now to try and, negate this.
Oh, they absolutely. These money junkies are not going to let a little thing like the will of the people get in their way. Thank you for the phone
I got
call.
one other thing I want to tell you real quick.
All right, stay on the line. I'm going to come back to you after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking with Nancy in New Jersey. And, Nancy, you had one more comment you wanted to make.
Yeah, I wanted to let you and your listeners aware of Liberty Health Share. It's an alternative which is Obamacare compliant. It's not insurance. It's a sharing health sharing plan, and you don't have to be religious or anything. But it is run by a Christian ministry, and that's how they get it compliant. The cost of it is so much less than Obamacare or any insurance we ever had, and you're basically like a cash-paying patient, so you can negotiate with the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And it's working out really well, so I think people should look into it, because I have a feeling they might grandfather this in.
Well, it's kind of interesting. Last week there was a story where somebody had sit down running the numbers and said that for the vast majority of Americans, just paying for your medical care with cash was only going to be 1/5 as expensive as being in that Obamacare system.
Well, I believe that.
Yes.
Yeah, but this is great for anything catastrophic, like if you got cancer or a serious injury. My family, each person is covered up to $1 million.
Oh, boy, that's a good amount of coverage. I've got a very good friend who unfortunately is on Obamacare, and it's just not covering their medical costs, and they're almost at $1 million right now. It's an absolute shame. All right, Nancy, we're going to let you go here and switch over to Scott in Arizona. Aloha, Scott. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. First of all, I was going to confirm I was getting kicked off every time you started talking about Hillary last week. I have to refresh to get you back on. So
well, don't take it personal. Every time I talk about Hillary, my server comes under attack.
Right. So I just wanted to confirm that.
Yeah.
Second of all, I was expanding on what a caller was saying earlier about...
oh, and by the way, one of the attacks, I tracked the IP, it came from the U.S. Department of Defense in Huntsville, Alabama. So they got the government on their case now.
Wow. The second thing I want to say is, Trump, I was going to expand on what the caller was saying earlier. He's in extreme danger. If he gets in and he unleashes the FBI on Hillary and Bill, it's over with for those two. And anybody that supported him, it's over with for him. He will allow them to do their jobs, and that's going to be the end of it.
I would dearly love to see that, but we already know the wet work has begun this campaign season because of what happened to John Ash, that former president of the UN General Assembly. He was supposed to go into court today and talk about his corruption charges, and it involved a known Clinton bagman. It could have dragged Hillary Clinton into that. And golly gee whiz, he dropped a barbell on his own throat and died.
Well, I think dealing with somebody like him and somebody the caliber of Trump, that's two totally separate entities there. I think that Trump would be, if they tried to pull that up, or if they did pull that up, that would be the end of them as well. My thinking is, and the other thing is, they are not going to allow Trump in a debate with Hillary. I think he would absolutely destroy her in a national debate.
I agree. It's going to be very hard for Hillary Clinton to refuse to debate her GOP rival. Now, maybe Hillary is sort of banking on the fact that the GOP leadership is going to find some way to eject Donald Trump and put somebody up there that she can just steamroller over, the way Richard Nixon engineered his campaign against George McGovern.
Right. Like I said, I think that would be a nightmare scenario for the Clintons. And I was going to tell you, I was watching Fox News on the weekend, because that's what I do, is look at all the other news stations to see what they're saying. And they were attacking her left and right. I mean, does that mean that the GOP is, Rupert Murdoch and the GOP are now behind Trump? Or
I would like to see the GOP leadership be behind Donald Trump, because he is the chosen nominee by the GOP voters. And, to try and eject him.
Now, it is attacking Hillary. It is now attacking Hillary, and they're leaving Trump alone. I mean, they're giving Hillary the same amount of time, I should say, as they were attacking Trump. But they were on Hillary Clinton for long periods of time attacking
We're
her.
starting to see that.
Emails and everything.
Hillary has given them so much fodder to work with. I mean, what's Donald Trump actually done? He's made the illegal immigrants feel bad. That's it. All right, Scott, need to let you go. Talk about this when we come back from this commercial break. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, there are some people in the media who are realizing that there are some aspects of Hillary Clinton that need to be talked about. I have seen a concerted push to shift the focus away from that email server and toward the corruption in the Clinton Foundation, because that is a means by which Hillary could be brought down without risking the scandal of her having sold out her country as Secretary of State. But there's another more mundane reason why the corporate media is starting to look at Hillary. There is much more there to talk about. I mean, we've got Hillary's shady cattle futures trading, Whitewater, Flowerwood, Castle Grande, CIA cocaine.
You, your husband, your wife, your children.
Are you getting me? Okay. All right. So let's back up here a little bit. Okay. You have Hillary's shady cattle futures trading, Whitewater, Flowerwood, Castle Grande, CIA cocaine smuggling as part of Iran-Contra, the train deaths, the Arkansas Development Finance Authority, the way that Hillary went after and smeared all of Bill Clinton's sexual assault victims. Remember just a couple of weeks ago she was up there, women have a right to be heard and be believed, except for that white trailer trash, those sluts who accused my husband. She lost her law firm billing records from Watergate when they were trying to look back at that. Fired the White House Travel Office to give contract to the Hollywood Friends, gave sensitive technology to China in exchange for campaign donations. That's that 1996 Chinagate scandal. The murder of Vince Foster, the murder of Ron Brown. And there's a whole dead bodies list out there. Hillary Care, using the IRS to attack enemies, looted the White House when leaving, obtained FBI files on enemies, lied about sniper fire in Bosnia, refused requests for more security at Benghazi consulate, used her private email server to avoid Freedom of Information Act requests and accountability, and in the process exposed top secrets to foreign interests, possibly in exchange for more donations to the Clinton Foundation. Now then, turning to Donald Trump. What has he done? He hurt the feelings of the illegal immigrants. And we do need to go on out and talk with our fellow Americans about what's going on here, because the other day, Claire and I were at our local big box store, and we started talking with this lady, and I was wearing my Hillary for Prison T-shirt, and she said, "Oh, no, you couldn't possibly vote for Trump." And I'm going, "Why not?" Well, he's bad. Oh, really? Do you know Donald Trump? Well, no, I've never met him, but I know he's bad. Okay, what's bad about him? Well, I'm not really sure, but, I know he's bad. Who told you he's bad? Well, I saw it on TV. Would that be the same TV that told you Saddam had nuclear weapons? And then I went back and I said, if you want to know if Hillary is really pro-woman, look at the way she treated all of Bill Clinton's sexual assault victims. We need to talk to these people. Hillary's followers are all victims of a personality cult. Let's be less kind. They're sheep is what they are. They're going to vote for Hillary because we have to have a woman president. Doesn't matter if she's qualified. We're going to wreck the country. And these are the same people who told us we should vote for Obama because he was a black man. And look what we got from that. Obamacare, more wars, more spying, the economy crashing, massive joblessness, but we elected a black president. That makes it all worthwhile. So I'm sure somewhere down the road, when we are all underneath those radioactive mushroom clouds, they're going to say, well, at least we had a woman president, and that makes it all okay. Let's grab a phone call. Scott in Norfolk. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. I'm still focused on Brexit.
Yes.
And I was just thinking, I remember I visited France years ago, and I remember some friends of mine told me that when they converted to the euro, that everybody, big business, small business, local shopkeepers, took advantage of it and raised the prices. When they went from the French franc to the euro. And that happened all across Europe.
Oh, yeah, they were definitely taking advantage of that.
And it about killed senior citizens. I mean, destroyed them. So now I'm wondering, with Great Britain exiting the euro, a lot of these big businesses are going to say, well, it's expensive, we've got to convert from EU rules to our own rules, and we're anticipating recession. So they're going to use every excuse to not give raises to people, to maybe lay off people. And they're going to cause a recession.
The money junkies are always going to do that. The money junkies are always going to take advantage of every situation to loot the people. And I'll give you a very good example. Remember when this oil price war started and oil prices were plunging per barrel? You didn't see it at the gas pump for month after month after month. It didn't really start seeing prices go down at the gas pump until people just stopped driving. Then they went down. And now
it gets me, Michael, and I follow the news over in England every night, and there's this meme of, well, the markets don't like uncertainty. Well, capitalism is based on uncertainty. You've got technology destroying old technology. You've got new businesses springing up, destroying old businesses. It's all about uncertainty. Communism is what's certain.
So is fascism.
Is based on uncertainty.
So is fascism. And that's what these people are aimed at, a global fascist economic dictatorship where the government controls everything to their benefit and away from you. That's what they're after.
And what I would point to is Greece. I would say, listen, we know what's going to happen if we stick in this EU. More bailouts to come. Portugal's on the verge of bankruptcy. Spain is doing horribly. I mean, this was the best time for England to get out, or for Great Britain to get out of the EU.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that Merkel is screaming about it is because now she understands the German economy is the only thing left propping up the EU. And she knows Germany can't do that all by itself. And that's why...
Thank goodness for that Cologne incident being reported, because that's what sparked a lot of it.
Yes.
Remember those attacks in Cologne?
I remember.
When it brought to the forefront what happens when you throw a whole bunch of immigrants into a society that's not ready for them. And you know what? The longer... I know the EU, the European Commission wants this Brexit as fast as possible, because the longer it draws on, the longer there's uncertainty about the currency, the future of EU, and that might be what destroys it. If this takes another year and a half, they could destroy the whole EU. The markets will eat the EU up.
Well, I think it's not going to last that long because we've already got 8 other member nations getting ready for referendums. I think the whole situation is about to implode, and there really isn't a thing they can do about it, and it's going to be an absolutely devastating setback to the New World Order people. And hopefully they'll back off this war agenda. Again, I see the U.S. government going the same way that the Soviet Union did, and we're going to have to restart our country, going back to those original constitutional principles and all the amendments up to number 13, and say, okay, we're going to move forward from here, and let's learn some hard lessons from this disaster we just went through. No more private central banks ever, 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 ever. First person who shows up and says, hey, wouldn't a private central bank be a good idea? We give them a good, thick industrial coat of tar and feathers, and we run them out of town on a rail.
And we reduce that military-industrial complex that's gotten out of hand. That and the intelligence agencies that are creating a lot of havoc to justify their existence, and also to help the military-industrial complex make money.
Yeah, that's something most people don't understand. These so-called agencies and military cause problems because that is how they get more money.
It really comes down to that, just plain out greed.
Yes.
And people are that ruthless. It doesn't matter whether they're American, German, Russian. People are really that ruthless.
The money junkies are. The money junkies are. Okay? It's a subcategory. There are people out there who really want to try and do a good job at what they're doing, but they're being outnumbered by all these new money addicts who think anything that they do that gets them more money is going to be okay. It's like that doctor they put away for 45 years. He was telling perfectly healthy people they had cancer so he could make money off of them, and he's caused permanent harm to these people by giving them chemotherapy and radiation.
And we've got to open our eyes to see that there are people out there, and they're in positions of power a lot of times.
They are. What we need is to go back to a country where power is not allowed to collect and be exploited by the greedy. I mean, when the United States was founded, the power was in the states, in the local communities, and in the pockets of the people, and that central government was there as an arbitrator only. And that was the way it was supposed to be. And over time, the federal government has grabbed more and more power to it, just like the EU is getting ready to do by forming the European superstate, is what they're calling that plan. And they're rushing to get that put into place because they can't take the risk of any more countries leaving.
And no family dynasties, political dynasties, whether it be Clinton or Bush, no more of those. That's something I thought we left behind 200 years ago.
Well, I thought we left it behind with the Kennedys. So, but, it is a major, major problem. And again, it comes down to the fact that allowing too much wealth to collect in too few hands, you start seeing all kinds of issues. There really should be, if we're going to have an income tax at all, it should hit the people with money to keep the society balanced. And instead, we've gone the other way, where the ultra-rich pay hardly any taxes at all, and the burden is dropped on ordinary people to keep us weak and helpless.
That's how they do it.
That's how they do it.
They've been doing it for centuries.
They've been doing it for 300 years. They've been playing this scam. All right, well, listen, Scott, we're going to let you go here. We're coming up on the top of the hour. And here's a bizarre story. This is over in Dallas, Texas. And it has to do with a motivational speaker, Tony Robbins. And apparently, as showing what confidence can do, he literally set up a firewalk pit in front of the hotel and encouraged attendees at his motivational speech to firewalk, the way you'll see down in Fiji. And 30 people got burned feet. 5 had to go to the hospital. Now, I've been to Fiji. I've seen how the firewalking is done. There is a trick to it so that the heat does not actually get to your feet, and apparently this guy was unaware, but he was out there with his 4-day seminar, Unleash the Power Within, and when we're done, you will walk across the fire, and they're out there saying, yes, ouch, ooh, ee, ah, ooh, ah, ah, ooh, ah. Now then, getting on back to human-caused global warming, which is a myth. And again, we had snow here in Hawaii just a week ago. That does not happen. And there is heavy snow already all over the northern hemisphere. In the southern hemisphere, where it is the middle of their winter, they're getting snow. They're getting record snow down there. It's serious, serious stuff. Now, the other day we were talking about how the sun had no sunspots at all. And it's happened again just a couple of weeks later. Why is that important? Well, the more sunspots you have, the higher the solar activity, the more energy is being put on out. And we seem to be going into a new Maunder minimum. Now, Maunder was an astronomer who noticed, all the way back at the start of the Little Ice Age, that the sun seemed to be devoid of sunspots. And it was called the Maunder minimum, and it coincided with the Little Ice Age. And we are seeing all these scientists who are not on Al Gore's payroll saying that solar output is at a 100-year low. They're looking at the existing and theoretical solar cycles and say they're all going to line up in the next couple of decades. And for all this caterwauling about human-caused global warming and carbon dioxide is bad, we're probably looking at a new Little Ice Age, and it's not going to be very, very pleasant at all. It did cause a great deal of hardship. Now, the Curiosity rover is taking a little side trip to an area on Mars where orbital satellites overhead are showing these flows that come and go with the season. And they're saying that it may, in fact, be possible that liquid water does exist on the surface of Mars. It will be very, very briny so that it doesn't boil off in the lower pressure atmosphere. And they're out there, Curiosity is going to confirm the presence of liquid water on the surface of Mars. Well, I hate to spoil anybody's surprise, but liquid water was photographed on the surface of Mars by the rover Opportunity all the way back in 2004. And what we're seeing here is typical never a straight answer behavior, because they're going out to basically prove something we already know is there, for which they will then take credit. Which gets me on back to an article I wrote before about a guy named Dr. Gilbert Levin. Now, Dr. Levin invented one of the instruments on the Viking landers back in 1976. It was called the Label Release Experiment, and it wasn't blue sky technology. He took an established system for testing civic water supplies for bacterial infection, and he adapted it to the Viking mission, where they would take a soil sample, dump it in a nutrient solution that was tagged with radioactive carbon, and any microbes in that soil would burp, and a detector would pick up that carbon, that radioactive carbon signature. That experiment returned a positive result. And the data has been looked at by scientists in other countries and saying, yes, there is no question, this was a positive result. Now, Viking also carried another instrument called the gas chromatograph mass spectrometer that was supposed to detect organic molecules, and it came up negative. And NASA, playing it safe and political, ignored the positive, went with the negative, and said, Mars has no life. But there's a problem. It's now known that the Martian soil has a high content of perchlorate, and the original Viking GCMS would never have worked because it was destroying the organic molecules before it could detect it. Even the Curiosity rover is designed to get around that perchlorate issue. NASA's already basically admitted that GCMS data is junk, and it's time to go back and look at that positive LRE data and say, yeah, we actually detected indigenous Martian life all the way back in 1976. And to give credit where credit is due to Dr. Gilbert Levin. Now, China is about to go to Mars. They're estimating getting there at 2020. I'd love to see that. And China is getting ready to launch a second space station this year. They've got one up now. They're going to put up a second one. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, last segment of the program today. And a quick reminder that if you want to catch a podcast on your phone, the number is 605-562-5111. Now, for this last segment, I want to go back to something I was mentioning before about how Claire and I had run into this, let's be honest, totally brainless twit who thinks watching TV tells her all she needs to know, when in fact TV teaches what you're supposed to believe. And she had responded very negatively to my Hillary for Prison T-shirt by saying, oh, well, Trump is bad. Trump is bad. Oh, have you met him? No, I haven't met him. I know he's bad. Okay, what's he bad about? What's he done wrong? What crimes has he committed? I don't know, but I know he's bad because that's what I hear on the TV. And it reveals an area where Rivero's Rangers needs to get involved because it's not enough to just sit and listen to the radio show and read the website. And don't get me wrong, I appreciate you tuning into the show every day. And I appreciate you reading the website. And I appreciate people who financially support us in these very stressful times. Unfortunately, though, I'm going to have to ask you for something more. You need to basically do your homework and have a very simple, straightforward argument as you go out and talk to people, because you're going to meet a lot of these personality cult sheep who are convinced that Hillary is wonderful, Donald Trump is evil, because somebody else told them so. And you just go on down that list of all the things the Clintons are accused of and put them on the spot. What has Donald Trump actually done? Because prior to his running against Hillary, he's never been accused of racism. He's never been accused of being anti-woman. And just remind everybody, Donald Trump comes out of the world of business, where you keep your word or you do not stay in business. Hillary Clinton is a career politician. And career politicians lie about everything from sunup to sundown. She's been caught lying repeatedly over that email server. Politicians never tell the truth about anything. They're worried you might learn how to tell the difference, and that would be the end of their career. And you need to be ready to have a calm, rational discussion about what Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton have done over the years, and to simply say the fact that corporate media is telling you Donald Trump is bad doesn't make it so. Corporate media told you Saddam had nuclear weapons. Corporate media told you snow is a thing of the past. Just ask those people in West Virginia where they think all that water is coming from that's in their living room. We're going to have to go on out and evangelize, if you will, for Donald Trump to counter the smears and propaganda being dumped on him by corporate media that we know from Hillary's emails are part of her campaign. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. I got to do the Jim Goddard Show up in Vancouver. We'll be back tomorrow, Tuesday, here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, stay safe, stay informed, stay skeptical, make good choices, share what you know with everybody that you know. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.